Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Rich Politics. I'm so glad you've taken the time to tune in. Don't forget to follow us on all the social media platforms. You know the drill. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Well, we're speaking to somebody tonight that I've been following for quite a while on social media, someone that I admire, actually, and he's a Conservative. Yes, I do like Conservative members of Parliament, believe it or not. There are a lot of us as well. And he's joining me live, and we're going to be discussing a whole range of subjects today. But first of all, I want to talk about something that's been very interesting for me, and I think it's an incredible feat that the government have achieved, and that's the fact that they've nearly reached 18 million people being vaccinated. That's 1 in 3 people being vaccinated against COVID. An extraordinary task that this government have undertaken, and in my opinion, have been quite successful. The NHS is delivering more than 250 vaccinations every minute on average, and it's an incredible thing. We're going to speak to our guest today about that. It is Daniel. Daniel, how do I pronounce your surname? I always get it wrong.
Yeah, don't worry. It's Kawczynski.
Kawczynski.
So I'm the first of a Polish-born British Member of Parliament, and so very proud of my Polish roots. And I know that it's very difficult to pronounce. Many people from overseas have changed their names or anglicized them, but I'm very proud of my Polish roots. So I understand that there can be complications of pronouncing it.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think my name is Richard, which is German, but I think the origin is German, and Taylor is Norman, French Normandy or something. So I'm a right mongrel. I'm a right mix myself, to be honest with you. But Danny, thank you for coming on. You're the Conservative MP for Shrewsbury, and I've been following you on social media for quite a long time, actually, and appreciate your, this kind of work that you're doing for your constituents there. I wanted to talk to you, though, about a couple of things. Firstly, I want to talk about the vaccination and the Prime Minister's successful rollout. I mean, how do you think the government have been handling this vaccination rollout?
I went to the vaccination centre in Shrewsbury in my constituency last week and met with the large number of NHS team, the council involved, but also very, very heartened by the number of volunteers, people who have just donated their time and energy and resources to help in this Herculean effort communities like mine are going through to vaccinate everybody. It's obviously very heartening to see how everybody is coming together and helping the most vulnerable in our society, elderly people, people with long-term health conditions, those sort of people. And youngsters are waiting their turn for the time that they can get their own vaccination. But I think it's been all done in a very British way. Keep calm, stay calm and carry on, sort of thing. And I think we can be very proud of it, actually, frankly. If we continue to outperform the European Union at the speed and trajectory that we have been over the last few weeks, then I see an economic recovery in this country coming much faster than on the continent, which of course will lead to yet further debates among some of the existing members of the European Union as to whether or not it's optimum for them to stay in a mechanism which is so slow when it comes to dealing with probably one of the most important crises that citizens of Europe have faced for at least the last few years.
I wonder on that, Daniel, because we're vaccinating now a greater number of people every week than anywhere else in Europe, and we saw some of the botched up kind of aspects on the vaccination rollout in Europe, and they were trying to disrupt some of the supply. I mean, if we were still in the European Union, do you think that we would still have some of those issues that they were facing over there now?
Oh, absolutely, unequivocally. But also we would be trying to speak out as one voice out of 27. Although we were responsible for 20% of the budget over the last few years, the United Kingdom taxpayers was paying a fifth of all EU expenditure, despite there are 27 other member states. We did not have anything like 20% of the say. So the amount of money we were putting in was not commensurate with our level of influence. And of course, whether it's over the Eurozone crisis, thank goodness me, if we had joined the Euro, you can imagine the sort of complications that we would be in now. Yeah. And it's a good job that we did join the Euro, and it's a good job that we're no longer part of what is appearing to be a highly unsatisfactory bureaucratic more ideologically driven narrative for the European Union rather than the pragmatic approach and a very, if I say so, dynamic approach to the British government in securing all of these vaccinations and also putting in the investment into science and research, which facilitated this. I mean, these vaccines don't just materialize by themselves. It takes a huge amount of taxpayers' money, billions of pounds of resources in order to give the scientists and specialists the opportunity to come up with them. And these, the AstraZeneca vaccine and others, British workers and scientists have been at the cutting edge of this technology, and it's something we can be very proud of.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Well, given the huge rollout of the vaccination program, of course, close on to 18 million people being vaccinated so far, and it still continues with the different categories. I wonder what you make of our Prime Minister's announcement on Monday regarding the roadmap out of restrictions, because, you know, the lockdowns have paid a heavy price on a lot of people, not just economically, but socially, mentally, and many other areas as well. Many of our viewers and people that watch the show here, and I've had on guests who have been calling for things like gyms to be essential so they can open up, and we need to open up the economy for our children go back to school. I know, as you will know, it's slightly different here because we've got a devolved administration and the Welsh Labour-led government, which is doing things very differently from England, unfortunately. But we might come to that. But given the vaccination rollout, do you think that the roadmap the Prime Minister has put out there is the right, the timing is right more than anything? Do you think that he's being too cautious? Because some backbenchers are calling him to move faster, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, and we have actually Liam Zahawi coming before us in the 922 committee this week to give us an latest update on vaccination rollout. But look, to answer your question specifically, there've always been some people, either in the constituency, if you're a constituency MP, you will always have, let's say, 10% or 20% of the people who say to you, this is outrageous, the lockdown needs to happen quicker. And you will have another 10 or 20% of your electorate who say, this is outrageous, the lockdown needs to take place in a slower way, a more measured way. And then you have the rest of the population who, agree. But really, there are always highly polarizing, opposing strands of thought on these issues, and you're never going to please everybody. But I think the fact that the Prime Minister has attempted to engage and respect the advice given to him by the most senior professional epidemiological, I don't even know how to say that word, epidemiological,
yeah, that's the one.
Epidemiological experts. The fact he is listening to them and the cabinet is listening to them is very important, but also the fact that he is listening to business and economic experts is extremely important. Of course, the Prime Minister has the responsibility and the duty to listen to scientific medical advice, but he also has a responsibility to take into consideration the catastrophic damage that this lockdown is causing to the economy. And I just want to say one very important thing here. Because I'm a, sad politician, I think about the deficit all the time and the debt. When you knock on doors, I've been knocking on doors for the Conservative Party for over 30 years, and you knock on somebody's door and you say, hello, I'm the Conservative candidate, what would you like to speak to me about? And if they don't slam the door in your face, most of them say, what are you going to do for me? I'm a teacher. What are you going to do for me? I'm a firefighter. What are you going to do for me? I'm a police officer. What are you going to do for me? I'm a nurse. What are you going to do for me? I'm a pilot. Everybody is interested in what the government is going to do for them and for their industry or their profession, not surprisingly. But the politician also has a duty and responsibility to think about the national situation. And there is an umbilical cord between each one of us and the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom is operating in a sustainable, economically literate way. Then our long-term possibility for ourselves and our children to have a successful lifestyle is that much more augmented. And I just want to say to you, Richard, through no fault of our own, the United Kingdom has been now battered by two catastrophic global occurrences. The first one in 2008 was the financial crash, where the banks were going into meltdown. No fault of our own. This came over from the United States of America and from other jurisdictions in this global banking crisis. The Bank of England and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the then Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer, had to borrow hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds to bail out the banks. Now, during the COVID crisis, we are borrowing hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds to give to businesses, to councils, to other organisations, basically to keep them afloat. Otherwise, they would have gone bust. We are now £2.4 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
We spend more money on debt interest than we spend on the entire education budget. And we now are more in debt than we ever have been since 1962. So the percentage, the debt ratio to GDP is now, I think, 99%. So our debts are equivalent to the gross domestic product of a whole year's production of 60 million Britons. So you can imagine just how colossal it is. And I think the next general election is all going to be about the economy and how both parties intend to literally get the United Kingdom operating as expeditiously and as strongly economically as we were before the COVID crisis.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask you that question. What would be the key issues for the Conservative government ahead of the next general election? Because, of course, once we get there, by then we're all hopeful that this COVID crisis will be behind us. And the reality is going to strike that the economy has taken, as you've mentioned, a right battering, you know, and, of course, that recovery plan, as Boris keeps talking about, building back better, Keir Starmer talking about building back fairer, all these kind of phrases that are used. But ultimately, it's going to be a mammoth task, isn't it, for whoever will be in government at the next election because of the debt, as you mentioned, 2.3 or 2.4 trillion pounds worth of debt. And the interest paying on that as well is astronomical. I mean, what will be the other key issues, do you think?
Well, it is.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry. I mean, just to accentuate that, I mean, it would be the equivalent of you and me, and you know, we don't know each other's, you know, salaries and expenditure, but it'd be the equivalent of both of us, let's say, remortgaging our house for a second time, putting the car on a complete pay-as-you-go loan, maxing out on your credit cards, borrowing money from your relatives, and taking out personal loans from other banks. That's the situation, unfortunately, that some people in this country find themselves in. And it obviously creates a huge amount of stress and tension for them and their families. And that is exactly the situation that Britannia is in. That basically the United Kingdom PLC is in that same tight spot at the moment. And so the next general election will be, you know, I want you to know that we have been for a huge amount of denigration in the first years of our administration. The Labour Party accused us, they used a very evocative word, which is a brilliant marketing word, which they utilized, austerity. Now, austerity conjures up all sorts of Charles Dickens, Scrooge type, the most awful type of scenario, austerity. It has a sort of darkened connotation, doesn't it? Deliberately cutting back on services. If we had not taken, when the sun was shining, those very difficult decisions to get back into the black, and we reduced the annual deficit from £153 billion a year when we came into office in 2010 down to under £25 billion a year, the year before COVID reared its ugly head. If we hadn't taken these terribly difficult decisions to balance budget, like any other household has to do, or any other business has to do, can you imagine the absolute catastrophic financial situation we would be in now? And this is the problem. The previous Labour government, the good times from 1997 to 2008, were not saving money. They were just borrowing £50 million a year. So when the proverbial hits the fan, and you suddenly facing one of these cataclysmic global recessions, unfortunately descend on you with alarming frequency once every 10 years, you're completely unprepared. In addition to that, he sold off all of our gold reserve. Do you remember Gordon Brown selling
we all know about Gordon Brown selling off our gold reserve and emptying the pension pot. Yeah, we know about that.
You keep your gold reserves. You keep the most the most important investments you can for those emergency moments where the country is either facing a protracted war or a plague of this kind. And I think one thing we have to demonstrate in the next election is we are getting back to normal, protecting jobs, growing the economy, but we are also actually demonstrating to them we are pursuing a sound fiscal policy which will slowly allow us to go back into running a small annual surplus in order to start paying some of these debts off. Now, there are some people, Sir Keir Starmer's attitude is, yes, let's just carry on borrowing more and more. Let's have bonds where people can buy bonds and give us more money, so the government will get into even more debt. I don't think the answer to this country is ongoing massive borrowing, because at one stage in the future, our children will have a worse standard of living than we have got. And that's something which is anathema to most of us. It's much easier for us. I could go to the international markets tomorrow because of our very strong standing in capital markets, and I could go and say, that's it. It's too much. We're just going to carry on borrowing another 500 billion, 600 billion, 800 billion. They'll give us the money. But at some stage, we've got to pay it back. And it's not responsible for politicians of our generation to saddle the next generation, those in their teens day, with unmanageable levels of debt. That would be irresponsible on our part. And I think British people are so bright at fathoming this out, even though it's not part of their, many of them, day-to-day lives in terms of immersing themselves in politics. I think most people in the country realize that and will vote for a government which is pursuing a sound fiscal policy.
I was going to ask you, what do you think about the new leader, Keir Starmer of the Labour Party, as an opposition? Because a lot of people I've been speaking to, Daniel, and I'm not, pro-conservative, Labour. I mean, I've got my own political views. They might be considered to be conservative. But I just wonder what you think, because a lot of people I speak to seem to think that he's not offering any real opposition to the current government. I mean, how do you find, because he came in promising new management, new ideas, but he seems to be capped in hindsight to a lot of us because it's always thereafter. I mean, what do you make of him as a leader?
Well, I don't know him personally very well at all. I interact with a lot of Labour politicians here in the House of Commons, but he's not somebody I know personally, and he's not somebody I've spent a lot of time with. But what I will say is I will never forgive him for his very, very effective attempt at trying to prevent Brexit from happening. He performed a majestical, highly professional guerrilla type operation in the House of Commons to try to neuter or overturn Brexit. Now, I find it highly worrying where a politician of any kind seeks to overturn what the people have instructed them to do. Now, and isn't it fascinating? Every time the people of any country in Europe have had the temerity, they've had the temerity to say no to the European Union. And it's happened before in Denmark, in France, in Holland, and in Ireland. They had national referenda where the people voted in a majority against the proposals of the European Union. You know, Rich, exactly what's happened. They've been told, you've made a mistake, naughty, go back, do it again, and do it until you get it right. Well, they've picked a fight with the wrong people this time, and this is the first time in the history of the European Union since its inception where the people of an individual sovereign country have said no. And that instruction has been delivered. Now, I find it fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because if there's one thing I've learned as a politician, as a member of parliament over the last 15 years, if you turn your nose up at the electorate over a decision that they've made, you're playing with fire. You really are playing with fire. And I very much hope that the electorate will remember when they are considering Sir Keir Starmer as the next possible Prime Minister, that he does not have a great deal of form when it comes to respecting the collective decisions of the British people.
Mm. Yeah. Final question, Darren, because I know you're a busy man. I just want to ask you your thoughts on devolution, because you're just across the border there in Shrewsbury. Do you think devolution is a threat to our union? If not now, then maybe in the future. Do you think it stands to be a threat? You're in Wales in particular, not so much with the SMPs, but.
Well, this is the question I really came on your show for.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Now, I've said nothing. I've quietly. I was selected as the candidate for Shrewsbury in 2002, and I've been the MP since 2005. So really, I've been at this for now 19 years. So I've represented a border community for 16 years, and my experience over the last 16 years, I'm not speaking as a fresh new Tory MP who's just been parachuted into this seat and speaking through his hat. I'm speaking as an English member of Parliament, and by the way, you know, I'm British because I was born in Poland, so I'm neither English nor am I Welsh. I'm British, and there are millions of us who don't consider ourselves to be English or Welsh or Scottish. We consider ourselves to be British. And having represented the community and seeing as Cardiff and London have since 1997 started to diverge, and as the speed of that diversion has quickened, and as it has magnified beyond all previous understanding during this pandemic, then you see, if you get two sides pulling apart, it's the thing in the middle that sees the tension and where it rips. That's where the material rips. It doesn't rip on either side, it rips in the middle. And it's the border communities that are at the coalface of experiencing additional difficulties as a result of this increasing divergence between Cardiff and London. And, you know, from a human emotional side, I was speaking to one of my councillors right in the middle of the pandemic, a wonderful councillor from Ponsonby, Mr. Hignett, and he has grandchildren on both sides of the border. He can go down the road to see his grandchildren, but he can't cross the border just a few miles away to see his grandchildren. And I'm horrified that on such a tiny island as ours, in a post-Brexit context, where we should think of ourselves as a raft, where you try to bind the bits of wood of the raft as closely as possible to one another in order to have a watertight vessel which you're going to cross the ocean on. You can't afford any leaks. We want to bring ever closer together Wales, Scotland and England and Northern Ireland, because we think in a globally political world we should be pooling our resources, pooling our talents and working collectively as a single entity in order to catapult the United Kingdom in a strong global economic and political power. We punch above our weight being a permanent member of the UN Security Council, a situation peculiar to only 5 nations in the world. But we must stay united in order to maximize that those collective resources that we as an island. And I'm so sad, whether it's to do with agriculture, whether it's to do my bovine tuberculosis. I've got farms with land on both sides of the border, completely different sets of regulations. So whether it's bovine TB, whether it's hospital treatments, whether it's all sorts of things, whether it's dentistry, whether it's, you know, my association chairman who's on the border, he said to me the other day, he said, could you change the border, please?
Yeah.
Because if you change 200 meters, my house would be in Wales and I've got three sons going to university. I wouldn't have to pay on that side of the border, but I have to pay on this side of the border. It's madness.
Yeah.
And I very much hope, Richard, that the next generation of Welsh and English, the next generation, come together and say, you know what, we are not going to allow the nationalists and the separatists to monopolize this debate. We are going to come together as unionists and take them on and try to convince the British people that the future and the solution for our island is not more devolution, but less. We need to have more standardization across England, Wales, and we need to be pooling resources. And I feel passionately about that. And let's just end by saying this. We are the gateway to Wales We're very proud of our Welsh links in Shrewsbury. When I was first elected as a Member of Parliament, we only had 3 Welsh MPs in Wales: David Jones, David Davis, and Stephen Crabb. And the Chief Whip came to me and he said, I've got news for you. You're going to be sharing an office with the 3 Welsh MPs, because your Shrewsbury, we're going to lump in with the Welsh group. And I spent 5 years with those 3 great MPs, and I've enjoyed it so much. There's more that unites us, English and Welsh, there is that divides us. And I'm sure that there are enough of us unionists out there that believe in the United Kingdom and in taking on this ongoing move towards a separate, different agenda for each component part of our nation.
Well, Daniel, before I let you go, one quick question I'd like to ask you. What's the first thing you're going to do once all these restrictions are lifted?
Well, I mean, I have so many things. I mean, I've missed my swim terribly, because I go swimming 4 times a week, and of course golf. But the most important thing is just being back in the pub with a pint of Shropshire beer and being able to socialise. I think we are all, despite our political differences, social creatures, and I think what we've missed most is our ability to socialize with our friends.
Well, look, you should be okay from the 21st of June. We don't know yet, because the First Minister Mark Rakeford hasn't told us beyond Easter what's happening here. But if not, if I'm allowed to travel across the border, I'll pop up to see you in Shrewsbury for a pint, Daniel.
Well, you're always very welcome, either for a game of golf or a pint.
Yes, we will do. Danny, take care. Thanks for coming on Rich Politics. Take care now. Bye-bye.